What is up, you guys? Diggerdan here, coming at you with another video. Today I'm talking about 10 budget tips so you can read while on a budget. So without further ado, let's dig into it. So I was inspired to make this video for a couple of reasons, but the biggest one is that the state of the world right now is stupid. It's ridiculous. The cost of living is astronomical. Gas prices are up, food prices are up, just living in general is expensive. And I know for a lot of us on BookTube especially, we use reading as escapism to get away from the crazy world for a little bit every day. And it's just your favorite hobby, right? Even just owning the books is almost a hobby in itself. So I just want to talk about some ways we can do it responsibly, just both for our wallets, for our bookshelves, and feel good about it. So with that being said, my first tip is actually going digital with your reading. Now I know this was kind of controversial, because myself included, my preferred form of reading is the physical pages. I love turning pages. I love getting halfway through and realizing I'm halfway through and like feeling that progression, and even just like looking at like where your bookmark is, just things like that, and just realizing how lost you got into it. So I get it. Again, my preferred form as well. But it's just cheaper. Like for example, this particular copy for US is suggested retail at $20, and you can get the ebook of the same exact text for half of that. So if you're trying to save some money, ebook just makes sense. Now I know some of you are saying, Daniel, how is it the upfront cost is expensive? That's true if you get a Kindle, a Nook, I think is what's called. Just any e-reader, those can be very expensive. But if you download something like the Audible app on a device you already own, like your cell phone, for example, that's what I do, it's completely free to, like, you already own the device, you don't have to buy a new device. Now, if you get into e-reading and that becomes your preferred form and you want to do it in a more comfortable manner with a bigger screen, I get that, more power to you, especially if you're saving money buying those books. But that's an option, and just the mode of entry is way less if you start it on your phone, or an iPad, something like that, or a tablet that you already own. But another thing with going digital is that there are fill your Kindle days that happen once, maybe twice a year. That if you just type it in the internet, there's going to be multiple blogs, multiple pages that are saying, oh, this is the date for the next fill your Kindle day. And I did snag some of those back in December when someone I scrolling on TikTok and it popped up on my feed, a female talking about like a bunch of the romance books that she planned on claiming. So I could see she was excited and it was fun. And I wasn't really into the romance, but there were some fantasy stuff that I did end up snagging, which is cool. So just there is also the fun of the hunt with the fill your Kindle days as well. Now tip 2 is probably the most obvious, and that's just utilizing your library. So again, going back to that preferred form of reading, if it's preferred to go physical, then you can borrow the physical from the library. But there's also a cool app called Libby, Libby, that just using your library card information, you can also borrow digital copies like ebooks, as well as audiobooks, and just listen to them or read them right in the Libby app, or you can do it on the Kindle app as well. But you just have to have your library card to use it. So I know a lot of us readers, we prefer to own the books. I get that. But especially if it's like the start, like say this first book of a series that you've heard good things on, but you're kind of shaky if you want to buy the whole thing. Because I know a lot of us, when we hear like a trilogy, for example, we hear it's good, we're excited about it, we just buy the whole all 3 of them or all 6 of them, however many are in the series, and then we read the first one, and then it's like, I'm kind of you either DNF it or you don't love it, and then it sits on your backlog forever. So yeah, I try to use the library when I can. My current book I have borrowed from the library is actually Solo Leveling, which I thought was the novel version, but it turns out it's the graphic novel version. So it's still really good. I definitely do recommend it. And the Libby app is amazing too, because I borrowed a lot of the Wheel of Time books even though I own them, I wanted to read them at work, like on lunch breaks, things like that. But I didn't want to lug my big book or brick of a book around. So with the Libby app, I could just use my phone and I could swipe while I'm reading, while I'm eating. and it was a good time. And then I come back home and I'm like, and then I flip to that page and it's like, whoa, I read 20 pages at work or whatever, you know? So that was really satisfying as well. And again, it's all free. The only con I really have with Libby is that there's only so many copies that the library has, or that my library has at least. So there tends to be a waiting list for a lot of titles, especially for newer things. Thankfully for the Wheel of Time stuff that I was talking about, it wasn't crazy. They had, at least for the first few novels, they had like multiple copies. So even though there was maybe a waiting list of like 1 or 2 people, there was maybe another copy. So it worked out. But some of the things like any new Brandon Sanderson book, it's like expected wait time is like 6 months, 9 months, you know? So some of the newer stuff, maybe Libby isn't the way to go, unless you are very patient. But like, it's a great way to kind of dip your toe and be very non-committed. You can do it from the comfort of your own couch or bed or just your own home. So yeah, number 2 is library/Libby app. So my tip number 3 is to look at some public domain books online. Now, if you're asking what's public domain, basically nobody owns them anymore. So there's a couple websites I found online. One is called ProjectGutenburg.org and the other is Manybooks.net. And they both have catalog of like tens of thousands of books that they have available for ebooks. The text is right on them. And Manybooks actually came out with an app very recently. When I was actually doing research for it, I found it was new. So I downloaded that, and again, they're free, so you can just download them and then read them. Caveat with that is that since it's public domain tends to be very old books, it might be books you've already read or books that you've kind of written off because you're not interested because they're so old. Like myself, I have a problem with really some of the older books, like just because of their prose and like the type of language they use. So sometimes I struggle with that personally. But it still could be a great resource if you say, I saw Great Gatsby was on there. Like say that was your favorite one and you don't have growing up, you don't have a copy anymore. Things like that. So it's definitely a cool resource to look into. Again, that's ProjectGutenburg.org and Manybooks.net. And again, I'll have links in the description down below for those as well. So number 3 is public domain books. Now, tip number 4 is probably going to be my most controversial. Let me know in the comments down below. But it's very simple. Just buy less books or stop buying books and read what you own. And I can at myself really huge on this one. Because I think I own over 300 some books and I haven't read close to 150 or 200 of them. So I'm very, very behind on my physical TBR. So just very simple. I know we don't want to hear it. I know we always want to buy the big new shiny thing. But just buy less. Your wallet will thank you. Your shelf space will thank you. And yeah, because if you own, like for myself, this is more at me right now. If I have it, it's probably because I was excited about it at one point. So I just have to open the book, start reading it, and then let it take me away. And if I don't like it, great, I'll put it down and pick up a new one, you know? So I think we have to be more generous or more patient with what we already own, if that makes sense. So yeah, tip number 4. Now tip number 5 is like the last free tip, I would say. And that's getting gifts from friends and family. Now I know, and I'm not saying that's just going out and begging, hey, buy this new book for me. Daniel told me I can't afford a book. That's not what I'm getting at. I'm getting at when there's holiday season, like for myself, I celebrate Christmas, or for your birthday, and people are asking, hey, what do you want to get for whatever occasion? Most likely you probably have a TBR that is hundreds of books long that you don't own, just like I do. So you can send them Amazon links, you can send them whatever, just tell them the title of the book, things like that. So use your friends and family's requests to your advantage. And I'll have an asterisk and I'll say have a gift to yourself as well, and use some sites like Book of the Month that you can buy one book a month from a list, and it's like 1 out of 5, I think is what it is. And depending on what subscription tier list you go with, it's $20 per book or a month or less. I think the cheapest is like $16.66 a month. So that's another thing. So gifts from your friends and family or gift to yourself, I would say. But that gift to yourself isn't free, so whatever. Just something you can do that it's a little cheaper, because brand new like hardcover books, cheapest I've seen is like $30, right? So if you do the book of the month, it's at least $10 cheaper at $20, right? So just some food for thought. Tip number 5. Now, tip number 6 is where you have to start shelling out the cash, unfortunately. But something I love to go to are estate sales, garage sales, and yard sales, which are basically all the same thing. But it's people at their own homes putting up a sign saying, hey, I don't want this stuff, come and buy it off of me. For all of you who don't know what those are. And I have had a fair number of books on my shelves that I've gotten from estate sales, garage sales, yard sales. And a lot of people, it's like, some of them even give them away for free. They're just like, I've had these for years. I'm moving. I don't need these anymore. So it's like, there's a box over there. Go through them and take what you want. That's very lucky instance. That's happened to me only once or twice. Honestly, like, people are pretty reasonable with what they're asking. Like, the most expensive I've seen, I feel like has been, unless it's like a special edition, has honestly been like a couple dollars per book. Which, again, if you're excited about it, that's not bad at all, when you could buy it new for $20, $30, $40, depending on what edition or whatever. But again, I've gotten books very cheap for free, like I mentioned, or for just a quarter or $1, so you can get them very cheaply at people's resales sales. Tip number 7 is kind of similar to the last one, but it's going to thrift stores or to secondhand stores or op shops if you're an Aussie. And they usually have a book section, and like Salvation Army or Goodwill. Goodwill is kind of the more expensive one, but still it's a thrift store. They usually have a book section, and it's usually, at least personally, the one I've seen, it's not all that picked over. Now, again, there's usually not that much fantasy or sci-fi. There's a lot of self-help stuff. There's a lot of like old textbooks that people are like, I don't need this anymore. I don't know how I still have it. There's a lot of that stuff. There's a ton of romance typically. But if you're patient with it and you go through the shelves and you kind of comb through it, kind of like I do every time I go to a books or a thrift store, if you look at any of my book hauls, vast majority is from thrift stores. But normally, like at least the thrift stores around me, unless it's Goodwill, I can get it for like a quarter, 50 cents, $1, depending if it's softback or hardback. And again, it varies depending on what chain or what like independent thrift store it is. Like the most expensive I've gotten was, I think, like a $4 Percy Jackson Lightning Thief book. But again, that was Goodwill. So if it wasn't Goodwill, I would say the most expensive I think is like $2 from Salvation Army for like a hardcover. But most of them I get for $1 or cheaper from thrift stores and secondhand stores. So yeah, you never know until you go and investigate, right? For me, that's kind of part of the fun, is kind of like the hunt of finding, what is out there, but then also realize you're basically not stealing, but it's like basically paying pennies on the dollar for it, right? So it's just really fun, at least for me personally. Now, tip number 8, kind of sticking with the physical storefront, is going to like used bookstores or independent bookstores. Now, I mashed these together because used bookstores, obviously they sell them at discount. One by me I like to go to is called Second and Charles. Again, if you watch any of my book review or book hauls, I've probably mentioned them at some point. They even do trade-in, so it's like if I have an old book, it's like I DNF'd, I didn't care for it. Instead of me just donating it to a thrift store, I can give it to Second and Charles, and they'll give me store credit for it, which is pretty cool. But yeah, so they do that. But then also independent bookstores, I know sometimes they get a bad rap because they're usually sell just at the MSRP price, because they unfortunately can't really afford to really have very narrow margins like Barnes & Noble or Amazon especially. But sometimes if you like are signed up with the independent bookstores like email, sometimes they'll send sales saying 25% off sale, or they'll give you like $5 off whatever coupon, things like that. Obviously that's very dependent on each store, so take that with what you will. But if you take your time and do your little bit of research with what's around you, you can usually find pretty good deals. Now, tip number 9, kind of going back to the online stuff a little bit, is using online used sites. So that includes Thriftbooks, half-price books, eBay, Personally, I love using Thriftbooks. If you look behind me on this shelf, I have a ton of the Redwall books, and I got every single one of those from Thriftbooks. And I think I've gotten, I forget how many it is. I think it's like 15 books that I've got spent. I think less than like $50 on all of those. So that's pretty good. The only catch is that you have to have so many dollars for free shipping. I think it's $10 limit. So it's usually 2 books or 2 or 3 books depending on what it is. But again, you can set up an account, have a wish list, and then it'll ping you when things go on discount, things like that. Half price books I haven't personally used, but I've heard good things about it. And then eBay, everybody knows eBay. Same thing, you have on the wish list, whatever. But personally, I really like Thriftbooks. Another caveat with Thriftbooks is that they don't ship in boxes. They only ship in like that very thin plastic bags, which isn't always the best for the books. Like, for example, going back to that, talking about Redwall again, these were 2 of the 3. The very first one, the Redwall, I gifted to my brother to see if he would like it. But like all 3 of these are messed up in the spine. Because I think they were shipped USPS. I got these a few years ago. I can't remember exactly. But that's not great. I don't want that on the shelf. Like, just that's disrespectful to the book. Now, I'm not saying don't buy from Thriftbooks, because I sent them an email explaining this, and then they, oh, I'm sorry, that usually doesn't happen. And then they sent me 3 again for free. And I think they even like had it as like express shipping or something like that. So they did take care of me, and the next 3 didn't have that issue. They were actually pretty good. It's as if I just went to a bookstore and I pulled it off the shelf quality. Yeah, so they did take care of me, but I do want to say that did happen. And another thing is, I'm sure they do it for inventory, but I don't like that they put stickers on the spine, because then when you go to peel it off, it looks not great. But so that's just another thing with Thriftbooks. But again, you're getting it very discounted, so take that with what you will. And then my last thing with Thriftbooks is I actually do have a referral code down below. I'm not sponsored by them, but it's their give a book, get a book. So if you sign up with the link down below, and then after you spend your first $30, you and I will both get a free book credit from Thriftbooks. So if you're looking at that TBR that's been growing and you're thinking about buying a couple used books, maybe think about using that link down below, and we can each get something out of it. So for tip number 10, it's kind of the most out there, and it's still technically free, but it's a little effort. And it's an app called Fetch, where you have physical receipts. Like, say I go to Kroger, buy some groceries, I come home and I snap a picture of that receipt, and then I submit it, and then I get points. I get Fetch points. And then after so many points, then you can claim those points for gift cards. And now one of the places you can get gift cards from is, that's right, Barnes & Noble. I mean, Amazon as well, but we all know Amazon's evil, right? So, for example, I have over 10,000 points, and it cost exactly 10,000 points to get $10 for Barnes & Noble. So I might do that, or I might just keep my points and rack them up until I get to the big 50,000 number, and then I can get a $50 gift card to Barnes & Noble. So just, again, a little out there, and this is one you definitely have to be patient with, because you only get 25 points per receipt, and then you have to have, that can't be old receipts, it has to be a receipt within the last 2 weeks. So it definitely takes some effort and some patience, but if you're already going to buy stuff anyway, everybody has your information anyway, so why not just sell your information for what you buy for points? That's kind of morbid, but it is what it is. It's just the digital age we live in now, right? So might as well get something out of it. So again, most out there, but again, if you're waiting for like a big book and you've got a ton of points, and because I have 13,000 points, I think is what it is, and I've gotten that over a year, about maybe 15 months. So again, you got to be really patient with it, but in the long run, basically free books, free money. So yeah, anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed these tips, please hit that like button. If you guys have your own budgeting tips or reading on a budget tips, let me know in the comments down below. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to see more from me, Diggerdan, please hit that subscribe button as well as that bell notification icon so you guys know when I upload each and every single time. And I will catch you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.